Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this webinar on demystifying net zero, the finance and business case. So we'll be with you for the next hour, exploring this critical topic if you're interested in getting on that net zero journey. Yeah, the advance the slide. In terms of housekeeping briefly, this webinar will be recorded and we'll be making the recording available after the session. We'll also be doing a write-up. There'll be really good panel discussion. I'll be shortly introducing a fantastic panel of speakers, and you'll have a chance as the audience to ask your questions. So please do get thinking as they introduce themselves. Any questions that don't get answered during the hour that we've got allocated, we'll try and address in that write-up that we'll be doing and publishing in the next few days. So, yeah, about green economy. So there's a couple of us here today from the green economy team, including myself and Trina and Alasdair. So green economy partners buyers with local trusted suppliers of green technology and services to deliver net zero projects. So we work closely with businesses and local authorities to deliver the low carbon transition and ensure that sustainable business decisions are easy, accessible and beneficial for all. We offer support to drive innovation and improve the competitiveness of green technology businesses, upskilling workforces and building a greener net zero economy. So just a very few additional words on myself. Yeah, I'll be working in particular with organisations on the sort of end user side, if you like, those organisations that are wishing to decarbonise. Working in particular as part of a programme called Be Net Zero here in Greater Manchester, trying to make Greater Manchester the easiest place in the UK to become a net zero business. So a bit of additional introduction to the topic. Estimates reveal that the UK will need 40 billion of investment per year into low carbon and digital infrastructure to achieve net zero. Of course, we've got to grow the green sector itself, the technology providers, the solution providers to support the transition. But many of those businesses aren't that aware with the financial support available to them. It is a bit of a minefield out there. And indeed, the buyers of green technology, the end users, if you like, they've got access likewise to a range of grants and subsidies to procure low carbon technologies and solutions. So in today's webinar, we're going to be navigating that complex green finance landscape to help you all on that journey to net zero and the business benefits that result. As I say, we're keen to get your questions coming in from the get-go into our panelists. So as they're introducing themselves, please do get your questions coming in using the Q&A function within Teams. And indeed, if you've pre-submitted your questions using the webinar form, we'll pose those questions over the course of the webinar. But I'm really excited now to hand over to each of the speakers respectively to introduce themselves. So we've got a cracking lineup for you, and I'll look to Tim Hayes, first of all, from Quantum Profile Systems, to say a few words of introduction, please, Tim.
Hello, I'm Tim Hayes from Quantum Profile Systems. We're a British manufacturer based up in Oldham, manufacture extruded building profiles, which we export throughout the world, as well as supplying the UK construction market.
Fabulous. And Stuart from Lombard, Stuart Graham.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name's Stuart Graham. I'm a Lombard relationship director in the green energy finance team. So I've been customer facing for the best part of 16, 17 years, now involved in supporting Lombard and our wider organisation in terms of green energy finance projects and the funding of them.
Fabulous, thank you, Stuart. Alasdair.
Hi there, yep, Alasdair Dalzel-Job. I'm a sustainability and net zero advisor at the Business Growth Hub, which is part of the growth company. So my main focus is on helping companies to achieve net zero, reducing their energy consumption, energy efficiency projects, as well as renewable projects across Greater Manchester and further afield.
And Trina.
Hi, I'm Catriona Watson. I'm the Net Zero Training Manager at the Growth Company. I'm part of the Green Economy team, and I manage a programme called Journey to Net Zero, which you'll be hearing about in a bit.
And last but by no means least, of course, Mark Renshaw.
Yeah, good afternoon. I'm Mark Renshaw. I work for the Access to Finance team with the Business Growth Hub. And basically what we do is we help businesses within the Greater Manchester region to secure funding to grow the businesses, whether that's the debt or equity. Prior to that, I was in commercial banking with a 30+ career with one of the major high street banks.
Fabulous. And I'll perhaps stress at this point, though, you know, a lot of us are working in the Greater Manchester area, serving that that particular city region. You know, we're very conscious that some of the delegates today will be beyond Greater Manchester. So indeed, you know, the content will very much be relevant across wherever you are in the UK. So we're keen to introduce one particular programme before we go into the Q&A that Trina said a few words about briefly. So Trina, over to you. We've got 3 slides. It is on the low carbon skills Journey to Net Zero programme.
Thanks, Ben. So the Low Carbon Skills Journey to Net Zero programme is aimed at individuals and businesses in Greater Manchester, and the idea is that we teach you the basics of what is net zero, what is carbon footprinting, how do you go about managing where you're up to with those, and how do you reach that target. So the government has a target to be net zero by 2050. Greater Manchester has a target to be net zero by 2038, and to achieve that we'll need to see some really big changes both in consumer behaviour, in office place culture, and also in policy to reach that by 2038. So this course is a fully funded course to help people in Greater Manchester learn the fundamentals of net zero, as I was saying. There's 21 CPD hours of guided training, and at the end you have an opportunity to take an assessment to gain a level 3 accreditation in the low carbon skills journey to net zero. It's open to any employed learner who lives or works in Greater Manchester, and it's delivered in partnership with Be Net Zero, which is a coalition of partners across the Greater Manchester, who, as Ben was saying, aim to make Greater Manchester to be the easiest place to be a net zero business. The way we do that, we go through 7 modules. Start off with climate change in you. What is climate change? How do you impact it? How does your business impact it? But also, how might climate change impact you, especially in the workplace? We then move on to carbon footprinting. How do you actually measure the kind of impact you are having on the environment? Which areas of your business activity are the biggest emitters? Once we've developed that basic understanding, we look at improving operations, so increasing our resource efficiency, particularly around transport and energy use. Then we move on to staff engagement. One of the great things about the course is you can have as many people from any particular business on it. So what we say is send as many of your staff as you can and start building your green team, and use that green team to engage with the wider staff, both your colleagues and the senior management. Then we look at your environmental impacts and building environmental policy. And the next one in building competitive advantage is identifying risk in your supply chain. So how to really understanding your supply chain better, where the risks are, particularly around climate-related disruption, but also where the opportunities are to decarbonise further down your supply chain as well. Finally, if we've done all that learning, it's time to put it into a strategy. So we have our final session is looking at your key areas of opportunity, your key areas of risk, and turning that into a bespoke action plan, which you can take away and start implementing in your organisation. Next slide, please. So the idea is that by the end of this course, by the end of the 3 days, you'll understand what key net zero terms mean and how to use them, and the risks of opportunities for your workplace. You'll feel empowered and motivated to begin or progress on your net zero journey, depending where you're up to already, and you'll create a clear and strategic plan to deliver the net zero ambitions. So all of these come through the guided learning, but also one of the biggest benefits is by meeting other people in Greater Manchester who are also on their net zero journey. From the course, we're building up peer groups and an alumni network, and we also link you in with all the other services and opportunities that are available through the growth company and through the green economy team. And that's pretty much it.
So you might have seen we had the contact details for our colleague Sanjay, who will get you signed up. Yeah, fantastic opportunity for those of you that are residents or working in Greater Manchester, and you know, apologies for those that are not, but it was too good an opportunity to not mention. So yeah, without further ado, let's go into a bit of Q&A with our fantastic panel. So yeah, by way of scene setting, Alasdair, what are the drivers for businesses at the moment?
Yeah, I suppose if you'd asked me that maybe 3 or 5 years ago, we'd still look at the same three pronged attack, or 3 key areas of focus. So it used to be about cost saving measures. So why are we actually interested in reducing our environmental impact, and the supply chain pressures that they become as a result of that. So the 3 have definitely moved around over the years, but we're seeing now much more emphasis. Obviously, over the last 12 months, cost pressures have been immense, especially with energy. So energy has become a key business metric, but we've seen certainly the supply chain pressure and being seen to be a green organisation and doing the right thing, but the enormous pressure that's been felt, certainly in the last 2 to 3 years, around achieving some form of meaningful targets to reduce companies' environmental impacts. Policy from both regional, national and international around the various COP summits as well has driven that interest, as well as people within the business. So people who work within a company want to feel they are working for companies. At least this is what we're seeing with the companies we speak to. They want to be working for a company that is are doing the right thing. So it's a really broad approach. I used to say I'm not really that bothered why people are coming to talk to me about energy efficiency or carbon reductions in the round, but it's a real mixed bag, effectively. And those, as I said, change depending on the time of year, the clients you're dealing with, and as we go through these various changes in finance, the cost of doing business, those also change.
And do you find, Alasdair, that clients are particularly interested in a specific technology, or are they looking at a range of solutions?
Yeah, I think overall, certainly when I am invited into company businesses premises, they're very open to discussions of all aspects of resource efficiency, looking at waste management as well, packaging, even transport fuel emissions. But in terms of energy efficiency, that has been brought right to the front of people's attention with the massive increase in unit rates recently. And as a result, projects that may have been a longer term payback and of less interest have become, as they say, no-brainers, overnight success stories. But I suppose the technologies that have traditionally been of interest have been around lighting and lighting controls, some heating systems and how to replace, upgrade, improve those. But more specifically, we've definitely seen an uptick in the last 12 months in interest surrounding solar and solar installations. So I would always argue, and I would always recommend that companies focus on reducing the amount of energy they consume in the first place, get their efficiencies nailed firstly. But I think a lot of these companies have tried that where they can, and it then come to the point where they were really trying to offset that price spike and the price increases, and then a solar PV system starts to make attractive sense.
Brilliant, thank you, Alasdair. So yeah, it's really good to have a business that is on that journey represented here in the form of Quantum Profile Systems. So Tim, yeah, you've recently made investments in some green technologies. Yeah, could you tell us a bit about the process and what led you to that decision, please?
Yeah, we've been involved with the Growth Hub since 2023. We first looked at solar panels in 2017, and the payback period was over 6 years. We picked up again in 2022, and the payback period had gone down to 2 years. So the research we did pointed us in the direction that it was very cost effective to go down the solar energy route.
And what were your motivations? Yeah, it's primarily financial, or was there a mix of considerations?
Ultimately, as a manufacturer, we're proud to be an independent British manufacturer who try and be as sustainable as possible. So sustainability is core to our messaging, but importantly, the cost benefit has to be there. As a manufacturer, we need over 1 million kilowatts of energy per year to run our site. And we've done all the quick wins. So we've reduced the energy that we need to produce a kilo of material by 15% through our relationship with the Growth Hub over the past 5 years. Any future development was going to be in a big project like this. The other factor, of course, is financial. Before 2022, our energy bill was around about £150,000 a year, and it went up to, or would have gone up to, over £400,000 a year. So very quickly, the cost of having solar power is much lower than the benefit received.
Yeah, and what challenges did you face?
Ultimately, our site was built in 1987. So before we could go and have solar panels installed on our roof, we needed a brand new roof in the first place. So we had to have a new roof, where we had to have the roof overboarded beginning of 2022. So there was cost involved there. At the same time, we sort of wish we'd done the roof and the solar project at the same time, because, for example, we had vents on the roof that if we'd have known, we'd have moved their locations, because actually it reduced the number of solar panels we could have had. Whereas if we'd done the project all in one project line, we would have identified these issues at that point. But it's small things like that would have made a bit of a difference. And
yeah, how did you build the internal case? Did you have to put a formal business case together?
Yeah, ultimately, once again, I go back to cost benefit, but it is simple to work out. You know the size. In our case, we know the size of our roof. Therefore, we knew what type of solar system we would get up there and what the capability of production from that solar system was. So peak times we can get up to between 700 and 800 kilowatts from our system. We looked at a half roof system, went for a full roof system. The system we worked out would provide around about 35% of our total energy needs. Since it's gone live, if we were only running 3 extrusion lines and it's sunny, it will provide 100% of our energy needs, which is just brilliant. So actually, the calculations are quite simple to make, because you know what the output's going to be, and therefore you can quite quickly work out the payback period.
Right, and yeah, given the theme of this particular webinar, yeah, how did you fund it? Did you look at different alternative ways of funding the investment?
We looked at a number of options, and in the end we did it with a credit from Lloyds, so there's no actual additional funding required, because the solar project in itself was seen as a very low risk thing for us to do. So that's how we funded it.
Yeah, and I think we discussed earlier before we kicked off the webinar how, yeah, perhaps you've experienced that, you know, certain funding schemes will come and go, but yeah, there's only ever going to be more schemes coming along, given regional and national targets and obligations, of course. So yeah, how would you recommend other businesses looking to go about this kind of project?
I'll be honest, we've had a lot of good support from the Business Growth Hub, yourselves, and that guidance has really helped shape our sustainability journey. And there's lots of quick wins to be made, but bigger projects, the support and great knowledge available. So I'd say anyone who's listening today should be speaking to the Growth Hub, speaking to Alasdair. We really highly recommend on the journey that we've been on in recent times.
Fabulous. So going on to more detail on the the funding and finance side of things, then. So question for Stuart, if I may. So if a business is unable to fund using CapEx, what alternatives are there?
So I'd say, Ben, it's probably the funding options are going to be quite specific to the businesses themselves. So some businesses might be able to self-fund if cash flow permits, but obviously, as long as it's not taking up that valuable working capital, that can be a cheap form of finance. But I suppose in terms of additional funds coming into a business, there's probably two options. There's traditional bank debt or there's asset finance. Traditional bank debt is an option, but could lead to maybe security requests, possible additional fees associated with that. So, I'm shamelessly in favour of asset finance just based on the industry that I work in. So asset finance, the product, I suppose, lends itself quite well to most renewable energy assets, not just solar. Typically, we've got a tangible physical asset that can be identified, and we can fund it over a term that kind of fits in with payback periods. So from a financial perspective, it's quite often a cash neutral funding mechanism, and it's certainly worked well for us at the moment in terms of the demand that's coming through and that we're seeing. The other thing, just to briefly mention, is so I'm based in West Yorkshire. I'd go and double check with government organisations and bodies and people that have got access to grant funding. We've got the LEP over here, the Leeds Enterprise Partnership, and they do have access to an element or a deposit element maybe that can go into a solar project or a biomass project. So that can certainly help as well. Yeah,
good shout. So there's that regional, local funding. There's things like the Industrial Energy Transformation Fund at a national level. The third round, is it, coming along shortly on that front? But yeah, Stuart, staying with you. Yeah, what do you look for then in a business before you lend?
So we've Lombard in particular. We've been in the renewables business for well over a decade. So we've got quite a well-defined credit policy. We've got a few actually, depending on size of project and where the debt will sit. But for the purposes of this discussion, it's probably it would fall into our counterparty policy. So typically, this is a business looking to invest in, let's say, solar panels that's going to have a direct benefit for that business. So we would look at the underlying operating streams, profit streams coming into that business, look at serviceability based on standalone basis of that entity, really. So we'd look at serviceability very much in the same way we'd look at any other project. There's no kind of magic or no science behind us looking at a solar project compared to us looking at, let's say, a CNC, for example. We look at serviceability and then we look at the asset. So for solar or for biomass, we might well be looking at things like the manufacturer. We might be looking at the installer. We also, we're interested in those third-party consultancy reports as well, which go hand in hand, especially with solar. They can be very useful in terms of demonstrating payback periods and cost savings. But yeah, it's all about serviceability, I suppose. Can the business afford to pay back that debt quantum over a 7-year period? And if it can, then typically we'd be happy to advance the funds.
Yeah. Okay. Great. And I'd like to bring Mark in, who may like to sort of reflect on that, but also let's start to address, how businesses might start to simplify that internal sign-off. Mark, is that something that you can address? Mark, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. What I was going to say is I sort of would concur with what Stuart said there in terms of any funder that's going to look at this is going to look at it from the point of view of serviceability. It's the same as any other proposition to a lender. And clearly asset funding is the obvious way to go if you're going to go down the solar. So you're putting solar panels in something like a CapEx expenditure like that, then that's the way to go. But as sort of Stuart said as well, looking at the business, there's often other options to bring funding in. And it comes down to the same situation of understanding from the business point of view what the payback is from what you're doing. You need to start from the point of view of, if you're going to take these steps, what is the financial benefit to you doing? Because obviously there's a cost involved in you securing that funding. So you need to understand that the investment you make does have sufficient payback to more than compensate for the costs that you're going to put it in. So from Stuart's point of view, because you've got an asset in there, then the asset is going to be a key thing that a funder from that sort of area is going to look at. But generally speaking, if you're looking at a basic loan for the facility, then you are going to go for a business plan. They want to understand what your plans are and how they're going to sort of take the business forward. So it would be, because it's badged up green, it doesn't really change it from any sort of other lending proposition.
Yeah, noted. And it's interesting to reflect the complexity of calculating those carbon footprints. But yeah, it's getting typically, solar being a great example, payback periods are coming down and down as the volumes of manufacture go up and up. Yeah, making it easier for all businesses to invest and make that case. Stuart, yeah, so that energy crisis Alasdair mentioned, these massive rises in energy costs, has that impacted on the level of interest in renewable energy? Presumably it has.
Yep, absolutely, Ben. So coincidentally, there was a tweet that I read this week from MCS, who are the standards organisation within the renewable energy industry, and they tweeted that within the first quarter of this year, they'd had 60,000 installations of renewable energy assets by accredited MCS installers. And just to put that into context, I think 2020, there was around about 50,000, 55,000 throughout the entirety of that year. So 60,000 in quarter one this year is significant. And obviously, if it carries on at that run rate, we're looking at something like a 5 times increase in installations just from the data that they hold. So yeah, there's a growth. That trajectory is obviously upwards. How quickly it's going to increase is probably going to be very much dependent on where the energy sector goes as a whole. So there's obviously trends at the moment in terms of our energy use as individuals, as businesses. There's a trend that's saying we're using more energy than what we were 5 years ago, and in 5 years' time we're going to be using more energy than what we are now, and that's probably going to be accelerated as well if you take into consideration things like the transition from internal combustion engines over to EVs. Businesses are looking to kind of safeguard and future-proof their businesses, I suppose, as much as they can, and energy is a top priority in terms of doing so.
Yeah, so it might be a natural lead on to ask a bit more about the broader ESG benefits and perhaps the associated incentives, and that this might be something that any one of the panel might have a view on. Yeah, what are those wider ESG benefits beyond the simple, financial payback?
I'll start if you want, Ben. I
Yeah.
just touched on kind of the transition from internal combustion engines to electric vehicles. So businesses are kind of looking at this quite holistically. So solar panels might be one element of the solution, which might involve things like battery storage, charging infrastructure, and maybe even migrating people onto company car schemes or salary sacrifice schemes. So these types of solutions probably provide individuals with better access to owning an electric vehicle, for example, which might fall quite nicely into kind of that social aspect of ESG policies and strategies. The obvious environmental benefit is reducing carbon footprint. So obviously, there's significant kind of synergies with ESG and investment in renewables. But yeah, there's plenty of additional benefits if you start looking at the bigger picture.
Yeah, anyone else on the panel like to build on that at all? Any additional thoughts?
I was going to say it's some of the benefits could come from, you don't really see them straight away. So, for example, I think there was a Deloitte survey that said 32% of consumers were prepared to pay more for goods and services from businesses that had a reduced carbon footprint. So if you take that logic forward, and if you understand that the pricing levers for a business are sort of key to profitability, I think that somewhere between, if you increase your pricing by 1%, it's going to increase your profit something between 8 and 11%. So it has a disproportionate effect in a positive way. So with that logic, you could potentially not only sort of gain more customers because of the green credentials that you've got and you can sort of demonstrate, but equally you may have the prospect of increasing your pricing on the back of it. So it's not always obvious the benefits, but they are there. And equally sort of thinking about the supply chain as well, in terms of if you're part of that supply chain, what's the demand coming downstream, you could lose that if you're not showing those green credentials going forward. So I think there are a number of benefits really when you start to think about it.
Yeah. So I was really struck at a recent event organised by the Institute of Chartered Accountants at how reporting these days goes so much beyond just the financial towards these ESG factors. And equally, I was in an event not so long ago, highlighting how banks are looking to these factors generally when they lend. I know we haven't perhaps covered that sort of angle of traditional bank debt, but yeah, I'm aware that these ESG factors are important, the decarbonisation and the broader ESG factors, the social, etc. Yeah. So I've got a question in that might be a fair point to feed into the panel at this point. So yeah, the UK government doesn't have the collective funding power of the USA or the EU, who have $1 billion inflation reduction strategy and a green industrial deal, respectively. What should the UK government do to support its green business sector and improve our competitiveness in the global net zero race? So that was a question from one of the delegates. Anyone like to take that?
Ben, just briefly for me, I mean, I know there's definite challenges with grid infrastructure. So if the government could do anything to accelerate people being able to, private businesses being able to install, get up and running wind farms, solar farms, etc. I don't think there's an issue in terms of the appetite to do it. I think there's an issue in terms of being able to connect to the grid. So if the government could do anything, it would be look at how ways and means of accelerating the process of being able to get grid connections. I think that would help significantly.
And that's not just on the local network as well, it's on the national infrastructure side of things. The fact that we have last week significant parts of Scotland had to stop or curtailing their wind generation because the capacity is not there to send that down to the southeast of England where it's needed. And in terms of that, that's something that we're going to need to do much more of in investing in our national electricity distribution grid infrastructure. Just one point coming back to the sort of additional benefits side of it was we've talked a lot about the environmental, the social, ESG, winning clients, customers, but one thing that I've noticed in terms of those additional benefits that don't always get seen and aren't always spotted is the additional manufacturing or business benefits of investing in renewable or energy efficient technology. So an example might be that a company installs new lighting on their premises and they can see what they're doing clearer, looking at quality control, quality rejects. We had a company in Stockport that had some older sodium lamps in their manufacturing operation, and their product, their stainless steel product, was welded and then fettled up and cleaned. A low loader arrives, their product gets onto the low loader in daylight, and they see all sorts of defects. It needs to go back inside, it needs to get reworked. So either the lorry has to go away and come back another day, or that's lost time and you're paying for the guy to sit there in his wagon whilst you're waiting for that work to be done. They put new LED lighting in, crisp white light, daylight color rendering, so they can see what they're doing. So the quality of the work was far better, reducing rejects off-site and also reducing the amount of time having to work on stuff on their site as well. So it's those added bit of business benefits that potentially going to Stuart with a proposition, it's not just about the investment, not just about the new heating system or lighting system, and there's the big capital project, and you say, this is what I want to do. Have you thought about all the other business benefits that go with that could even account for things like lost time incidents, health and safety, occupational hazards that are going to be eliminated as a result of this, preventative maintenance, and all those other additional business benefits that tend to get forgotten about.
Brilliant. Yeah, thanks, Alasdair. So yeah, just a reminder to all the audience, please do get your questions into the Q&A. Prina, I've got a question for you. Yeah, you've been serving a lot of businesses. A lot of businesses are represented, at least on the Journey to Net Zero programme cohorts that you've been delivering. So yeah, I'd like to ask you, what additional insights have you got? For instance, what should the UK government be doing to support these businesses? How many businesses are asking about finance? Where does it sit relative to other topics? What insights have you had from your discussions with delegates?
It's been quite varied across the board. Because we work with a lot of different businesses, but finance is definitely a concern for people. And when we look at the staff engagement module, one of the kind of big worries that people have is how we're going to convince the finance manager, is the kind of the end of the road for this sustainability journey. Well, how much does it cost? Oh no, that's too much. So that's why we look at things like the other benefits to the investment, as well as return on investment in terms of finances. And I think we are seeing a lot more. It's becoming a lot more cost effective for a lot of businesses now. Energy prices are so high, whereas before as you were saying before, the payback period for investment in green technology was much longer. But I think there's two things that the government can do, in my mind, that would really accelerate meeting our net zero targets. And one of them is training. I think we're in some of the workshops that we do, There's some people who have never even sort of come across the concept of net zero and have been sent by a manager who thinks it's a good idea or something like that. And I think there is still a big knowledge gap, both in what the risks are around climate change and also what we can actually do to mitigate it. So I think the more training, the better. Also in the installation of things like solar panels, heat pumps, I think there still is a huge skills gap in that market. And that's one of the things that we do with our Green Skills Academy, is training up electricians, roofers, plumbers in insulation, fitting heat pumps, fitting solar PV and that kind of thing. I think I'd like to see a lot more investment in that from the government. And I think the other thing that comes from that we seem to get from a lot of businesses, and again, it's sort of around finance, but more about leveling the playing field in the market. So we're trying to encourage the businesses that we work with to lead from the front and go in for these improvements to their energy production without waiting for the government to do something, because we don't think there is time. But I think if the government were to make more things a legal requirement and more or offer funding to enable people to do these things, so that they're not a competitive disadvantage by spending a load of money on one thing when the other businesses in their industry aren't doing it. So I think we could see a lot more leadership from government in implementing more measures that make it a requirement across different sectors to invest in green tech, to reduce your energy use and that kind of thing.
Yeah, you're reminding me how it is really across all sectors. It's all disciplines. It's all kinds of jobs are going to be impacted by this agenda, and indeed so many different kinds of individuals will be able to identify opportunities to decarbonise, it seems to me. So we heard from Stuart about the manufacturers of internal combustion engines. Heard from you, Trina, just then about boiler installers. These sectors are going to change dramatically. And I'm with you. I think there's more support needed there as well. So sort of moving towards summarising some of the great discussion that we've had. Just checking, are there any questions coming in that we haven't answered?
Could I just add a couple of, you mentioned before about benefits that weren't necessarily cash related, and there's 2 points I just want to bring up of benefits we've had which aren't becoming more sustainable, which aren't cash related. Firstly, one example is we moved our chillers from inside to outside. So they use less energy now outside, but also we've got the benefit of having less noise in the factory. So that's actually a win all round. It saved us money and it's brought down noise levels in the factory. Another one that's really worth looking into is data logging. So if you are a heavy energy use business, understanding where your energy is being used is critical. And it's helped us, we're looking at improving it now, but it's helped us identify bottlenecks. We cut our own tools in our factory, and we have our own in-house tooling capability, but yet it's become a bit of a bottleneck. And it's the data loggers that sort of said, well, actually, quite a lot of this kit isn't used at certain times. So it's actually meant we've moved our shift pattern around in order to maximize the equipment that we've got available. So that's data logging. It's just using data to bring down costs and better deploy resources, and just movement of stuff to chillers to remove unnecessary noise and reduce energy needs. That's what they're worth adding in.
Tim, just building on that as well, I think it was on one of these sessions last month. Can't remember the title of the session, but one of the consultants was talking about half-hourly energy consumption data, and it's a similar, I don't know if that's the same concept or similar concept, but basically, where are you using your energy? Can we cut out any kind of avoidable energy use and really get down to that low level, base level, and then start looking at where can we invest and what are the capex plans that can kind of drive further efficiencies. So I'd absolutely agree and concur with I can't remember the chap's name, unfortunately, who was on the last month's session, but yeah, he was good to listen to about the half-hourly data.
Excellent. Just looking at the clock, we're not far away from the top of the hour. So yeah, moving to sort of summarising some of the key points that we've discussed. How then, Alasdair, should a business get started with all of this, with this journey to net zero?
Yeah, I mean, obviously a great starting point if you are resident or you work in Greater Manchester is to join us on our journey to net zero, low carbon skills journey to net zero program. So obviously all details will be sent out after the session, but that is a really good place if you've nowhere you're not sure where to start, but you want to try and reduce your impacts. That's a really good starting point. Obviously, getting in touch with us in the green economy, if you're in that sector, you're wanting to look to invest in technology at your site, which may involve any of the energy efficiency technologies we talked about, or the wider green and environmental services that you might be looking for, then the green economy itself is a really good place to start that journey as well.
Yeah, and Stuart, any additional thoughts on how business should get started?
Yeah, I'd just say really drill down on the business case to understand what your current base levels are in terms of energy consumption, what your current base levels are in terms of your carbon footprint, which may sound like a big job, but there are lots of free tools out there. I know for a fact that NatWest have got a carbon planner, which is open to a lot of any business that's looking to start that journey, and that's a really good starting point in terms of understanding where in your operation carbon is obviously being produced. And then look at all the benefits, not just cost cutting benefits, but also those ESG benefits that we referred to, and then those knock-on benefits as well, things like supply chain advantages for being on that climate journey. I suppose I can't remember who mentioned it, but there's a lot of pressure coming from the top, from the PLCs and from the corporates that are looking for people to be in their supply chain that are on similar journeys to them. So look at it from a holistic type of angle, I suppose.
Real, and you were saying earlier how you're outside of GM. I'm reminded to repeat your point, Stuart, that there's funding available. Even if you're not in GM, lots of different schemes out there at the local, regional, and national level. We might wish there was more, and I'm sure there will be more going forward, so that we can hit those legally binding 2050 targets across the UK, for instance. That pressure from PLCs is I'm sure going to translate, and consumers alike going to translate into more support and more collaborative working across supply chains, etc. Any additional sort of final takeaways? Mark, perhaps next.
I think just keep your eye on what's available in terms of the funding, and whether you can get any financial benefit from those, because all the major high street banks outside of the asset funding that Stuart's talking about do have green badged loans, where I think it's HSBC give a 1% cash back. Very much the loans are free of fees. I think Lloyd's give 25 basis points of reduction in the interest rates, but don't get blinded by that. Look across the piece in terms of what is actually available to fund the project that you've got, and make sure you get the cheapest funding. And that'd be advice for whatever you're doing, if you're in the green area or not. But basically, have a look at those specific products that are out there that may give a benefit, but don't get blinded by them. Look at your other options as well.
Yeah, real. Trina, any final takeaways for yourself?
I think just to hammer home the point about training, I think the first step, which again we talk about in the Journey to Net Zero course, is awareness, and then you move on to behaviour change. In order to get to net zero, there are a number of different things that you need to bring into place. Finance is one of them, but a really big one is awareness, understanding and motivation amongst your staff team. So if you've not started already, start engaging with your staff, start doing a bit of a fact finding exercise of who knows what, where is everyone up to in your team, in your organisation. And then I'd start looking at training options like the carbon literacy training, or obviously the journey to net zero.
Fab. And perhaps the final word, Tim, to you. Yeah, I'm keen to know what your takeaways are, but also what's next for Quantum.
We're going to look at the data logging in more detail to see how we can benefit from it. I would say, as a person, I'm all about go, look, see. So if there is any manufacturers on this call who are interested in coming to have a look at what we've done, feel free to get in touch with myself or via Alasdair, because we're always happy to share knowledge. I think it's really important to do. But I suppose once upon a time, it used to be the costly thing to be sustainable, but not only is it the right thing to do, actually the business case speaks for itself, really. So that's my final takeaway. But thanks for having me speak. I hope it was interesting, useful. Yeah, it's been a very good discussion. Scratching the surface, perhaps, I think, but hopefully we've given you all, from your very broad respective backgrounds, those of you that joined this call, some useful new insight. So moving on to sort of final wrapping up, closing remarks. So as I mentioned briefly earlier, a recording of this webinar will be made available to the public. Do visit the Green Economy website to uncover the range of events that we offer. So we do these insights events once a month. So the next one will be on heat pumps. You can also look at the recording of the event last month on solar. So you can, as you can see, we do these monthly webinars on a range of topics. Would be good to see you again, and indeed mention to others, other colleagues, etc. you think might be interested. Yeah, you can also seek business support related to any of the points voiced in today's webinar. So the next slide includes at the bottom there our Green Economy email address. Do get in touch with us to ask any questions or just general kind of how do we get on the journey kind of questions. Wherever you are across the UK, do get in touch. I'll see those top 4 bullet points again. There's that Journey to Net Zero programme that Trina's mentioned. A really good starting point on how to decarbonise and implement a net zero strategy, fully funded for individuals in Greater Manchester or those that work for a GM organisation. I mentioned very briefly the Be Net Zero initiative, which is offering direct support to those in GM, but there's also a lot of resources on the website there that are very relevant wherever you are in the UK, and again, whatever sector you're in. And then, the Green Economy team provides support and resources to help businesses get started, including that events programme I mentioned, insights and analysis, market research and sales opportunities. So go to www.greeneconomy.co.uk. And indeed, if you're an end user looking to search for local trusted partners, do use our Green Economy Marketplace, the web link there. And again, this will all be in the report that we publish off the back of today's event. So with that all being said, thank you to all our audience for attending. Again, I hope you got something valuable out of it. I certainly did. But moreover, massive thank you to all the panelists. Thank you for all your great insights.